Assalamu alaikum. This is Dr. Asir Ajmal here with lecture 24 of Forensic Psychology. Today we'll continue to talk about personality disorders in adults. More specifically, we're talking about the antisocial personality disorder or psychopaths as we call it. First, मुझे the term psychopath. It seems more like a negative label rather than a description. So I personally prefer antisocial personality disorder. There is a lot of literature now coming out on psychopathy. और ये शुरू हुआ है through a movement almost created by a man called Robert Hare. Robert Hare is a psychologist from Canada who was personally impacted by a lot of people with antisocial personality disorder, and he felt that as a psychologist he was taken advantage of. As a prison psychologist, he was taken advantage of by prisoners who manipulated him because of his sensitivity and support for them. So he wrote a very bitter book about psychopaths, and that's how this movement started. So I will use the term psychopath, however uncomfortably, because it is now being written about a lot in psychology, and I think you need to be familiar with that. So what were we talking about last time? We were looking at first the antisocial personality disorder or psychopathic personality who is actually arrested and put to prison. Then we also spoke about the non-criminal psychopath. Now it's not criminal. What we mean by that is somebody who is arrested or convicted for his crime. And there you find such people in very high places. And that is not a big part of last time. It is excuse me. It is extended to the entire world. You can be in Britain, you can be in Germany, you can be in Spain, you can be in Holland, you can be in the United States, or you could be in Pakistan, Afghanistan. A lot of people in high positions in the career could be having antisociality or psychopath personalities. Why is it that people who are turning or following antisocial end up like this? First of all, they have very high IQs, they are very intelligent people. So they know how to run a system very well. Then, conmen, remember, they manipulate people, they trick people, and they deceive people. So this conning allows them to betray close partners by doing stuff. And they tell lies as a habit. Now they take themselves out to very difficult situations, and because they tell lies as a habit, they make them accountable. Okay, मेरे आप साथ जब भी दूर डरे हुए नहीं तो मुश्किल होती है. But body is not with us. They take lies. My contact करते हैं, इंटी कर रहे हैं. So let's say what people do. The problem with psychopathic personality is that they don't have a problem they tell lies because they have a habit of telling lies. उनके कोई body में कोई changes नहीं नजर आते कोई visible. So they are very convincing as liars. Then the social climbers. तो वो social climbing जो होती है वो हमेशा दूसरे के expense पे होती है. So there's a difference between a social personality and antisocial personality. एक social personality जो है वो genuinely interested होती है दूसरे लोगों में. Antisocial personality जो है वो social climber तो होता है वो दूसरे लोगों में interested हरगिज नहीं होता. He's more interested in how to exploit, how to use, how to manipulate people. So and they take no prisoners, meaning कि वो जो हैं बहुत ruthlessly काम करते हैं. And in this process, it is true that they commit many crimes and frauds, but they never get caught because of their high skills, because of their high intelligence, because of their cunning, manipulativeness, and deceitfulness, and the habit of lying. अच्छा, अब इसमें जो एक चीज़ हमने देखी थी, ये भी थी कि these people are generally found a lot among politicians. And again, due apologies to politicians, I'm not only talking here about Pakistani politicians. I mean to include politicians, whether they are American or British or German or Japanese or Chinese or Pakistani. So politicians tend to be liars. They have to. They've done so many bad things in their lives. So if people question them about them, they have to tell lies. And the better you are at telling lies, the better you will succeed. It's the nature of the job. And in order to get to high position, at the expense of your close friends, allies, and partners, in order to rise above, rise in the hierarchy, you have to deceive and betray and cheat and commit frauds, and many people do get involved in more serious crimes like getting their opponents assassinated or things like that. So it's a very dirty game, and of course if you have a dirty personality, you're likely to rise in that segment. So high proportion of politicians can be placed in this category. There is subversion of the legal system. Now this is very important because forensic psychology deals with law and psychology, deals with application of psychology in the legal framework. We must be aware that psychopaths subvert the legal system. They try and go around it. They find loopholes to deal with the legal system. They're not comfortable following laws. And that's one thing that gets them into problems. Now, we also talked about paranoid personality disorder and looked at the delusions that they have. I explained to you, and I will just quickly go over it briefly, that they have delusions of grandeur, which means they think they're great. There is something really amazing about them. They've been chosen by God for something great. They also have a delusion of reference, which means that they think people are talking about them, which means delusion of persecution because people are plotting against them. And then we come to delusion of jealousy, where they think other people are trying to, or their spouse is cheating upon them. And they also have seductive delusions, meaning that they see, young females or older females or whatever, and if somebody smiles at them, they think they want to have sex with them, they love them or whatever. So they see seduction in the opposite sex for no reason whatsoever. यानी उन हालात में जिसे हम नॉर्मल इंटरेक्शन समझेंगे एक फीमेल के साथ, पैरानॉइड पर्सनालिटी वाले लोग जो हैं वो समझते हैं कि वो उनको सेड्यूस करने की कोशिश कर रही हैं, उनको अपने जाल में फंसाने की कोशिश कर रही हैं ख़वातीन, एंड दैट इज़ बिकॉज दे ग्रेट ऑब्वियसली. तो ये डिल्यूजन ऑफ ग्रैंडियर से भी ये चीज़ फिट होती. सो वी वेंट थ्रू दिस क्वाइट अ बिट, बट दिस ब्रिंग्स अस टू अ फंडामेंटल पॉइंट which we touched upon last time, and I think there is a need to explore it further, because this debate of predictability is at the heart of forensic psychology. Predictability versus changeability. मैं ये predict कर सकता हूँ कि ये शख्स जो है जिसे अभी 6 महीने कैद हुई है चोरी के जुर्म में, जब वो रिहा होगा तो वो जुर्म करेगा या नहीं करेगा. This is very, very important, because as a forensic psychologist, it is my job to predict. Okay? But on the other hand, as a psychologist, I know that people can change. That people have changed in the past. Can human beings change? Now that is the fundamental question here. And as I said, we know they can. लेकिन यहाँ पे एक और प्रॉब्लम आ जाती है. साइकोलॉजिस्ट विल से कि जनाब प्रोबेबिलिटी को अगर आप देखें, यानी अगर आप 100 लोग देखें और उनमें से 100 लेट्स से आधी मुजरिम अगर आप देखें, तो आप ये देखेंगे कि जनाब 90% जो है वो चेंज नहीं होते, यानी वो आधी मुजरिम रहते हैं. ठीक, तो अगर 90% आधी मुजरिम रहते हैं तो हम ये कह सकते हैं कि एक शख्स अगर आधी मुजरिम है तो उसका 90% चांस है कि वो चेंज नहीं होगा. लेकिन what about that 10%? That is what causes concern. कि वो जो 10% वो चेंज हो जाते हैं, हो सकता है कि जिस शख्स के बारे में मैं प्रिडिक्शन कर रहा हूँ वो 10% में से हो, और उसने अचानक किसी दिन जो है चेंज हो जाना. उसके लिए कोई भी चीज़, अजान की आवाज़ आ रही है, उसने तब जो तुम्हारे किसी बुजुर्ग ने जो है वो, could be a number of factors why a person can change, and that factor may not be known to us. So, but this is a debate, and one side of the debate says that most crimes are committed by repeat offenders. ठीक है, यानी अगर आप पाकिस्तान में होने वाले सारे क्राइम्स इकट्ठे कर लें तो उनमें एक बहुत बड़ी तादाद जो है वो रिपीट ऑफेंडर्स की है. वो उन क्रिमिनल्स के हाथों से हो रहे हैं जो कि बार बार क्राइम्स करते हैं, और जो क्राइम्स एक दफ़ा करने में वो बहुत कम लोग हैं. लेकिन ऑन द अदर हैंड अगर आप मर्डर जैसा क्राइम देखें तो 40% ऑफ मर्डर्स आर वन टाइम ऑफेंसेस. ठीक है, यानी मर्डर्स जितने होते हैं उनके 40% परपेट्रेटर हैं, उन्होंने पहले कोई जुर्म नहीं किया. Now this makes sense actually if you think about it, क्योंकि मर्डर वाला पकड़ा जाता है और फिर उसे फांसी या उम्र कैद हो जाती है, तो it's not likely that they would re-offend. ठीक ना, तो आपके पास आधी मर्डरर्स जो हैं वो कम होते हैं, और उस वक्त तक जब वो पकड़े गए हैं तो उसके बाद बहुत कम चांस होता है कि वो दोबारा मर्डर करें. So 40% murders are one-time offenses. तो अगर एक बंदे ने कभी कोई क्राइम किया ही नहीं तो हाउ कैन आई प्रेडिक्ट कि वो किसी को मर्डर कर देगा? तो इसलिए जब वो मर्डर करता है देयर इज नो वे टू प्रेडिक्ट. रिपीट ऑफेंडर तो चलो आपके लिए आसान बना देता था. आप देखते हैं कि एक बंदे 6 क्राइम्स किए हुए, पहले डाका डाला था, फिर रेप के इल्जाम में अंदर हुआ था, चोरी की थी, फिर किसी को मर्डर किया था, और उसके बाद जो है वो उसने पुलिस वाले पे किसी पे हमला कर. So if you got all of these different offenses, you know that there's a very strong likelihood कि जब वो रिलीज होगा तो फिर कोई क्राइम करेगा. Now I want you to come to another very important category of psychopaths. This is something that I experienced as a student and then as a psychologist I had an opportunity to study this. And this is a phenomenon called university goons. यानी जो यूनिवर्सिटियों में गुंडागर्दी है उसकी भी एक पर्सनालिटी टाइप जो है वो साइकोपैथिक होती है. And I'll show you कि वो कैसे है. First of all, many psychopaths join student groups and especially student religious groups. Now this is very important to understand कि ऐसे students जो हैं वो religious student group में क्यों जाते हैं. First of all, it's a sense of belonging. इन लोगों की कोई attachment नहीं होती जो anti-social personality. Because they're psychopath, because they're not attached to the parents, attached to their brothers, not attached to any close friends, gives them a sense of loose belonging. इसमें जरूरत नहीं होती इनकी कि वो किसी के दोस्त बने. It gives them power. Because the belonging to a group, it gives them, they can go around, bully people, intimidate people, and harass people, and use it for violence and influence. तो इन्होंने लड़ाई करनी है. नॉर्मली उन्होंने लड़ाई की तो उन्हें पता है कि जी अगर एक को मारेंगे तो 10 बंदे आके उन्हें जवाब में मार सकते हैं. ठीक है ना? People can retaliate. But when they belong to a religious student group, then the other people will think twice before they retaliate. And they also use it for influence. Influence किस तरह? Usually they're not very good students. So they use this position to harass teachers, to get better grades. ये phenomenon पाकिस्तान में काफी common है. You know, in our universities, we have university goons who fit the profile of the psychopath perfectly. अच्छा, फिर इनमें एक sense of inadequacy भी तो होती है ना, because they're low achievers, they probably come from deprived backgrounds, they've been abused as children. It also compensates their sense of inferiority and inadequacy. ठीक है, साइकोपैथ आप हैं, आप में हो सकता है एम्पैथी नहीं है, रिमोर्स नहीं है, लेकिन अगर आप लोअर सोशल इकोनॉमिक बैकग्राउंड से आ रहे हैं एंड यू आर सडनली फेस्ड विद स्टूडेंट्स हु आर फ्रॉम मच बेटर इकोनॉमिक सिचुएशंस, सो बिलोंगिंग टू यूनिवर्सिटी political come religious organization allows you influence, allows you power, and it helps to compensate against a sense of inadequacy. Then you get to terrorize other students. Now इसका कुछ चीजें तो ये ना कि फायदे के लिए करते हैं, किसको terrorize के फायदे के लिए, लेकिन they enjoy terrorizing people as well. ये चीज भी समझनी जरूरी है कि a lot of times they terrorize people in order to terrorize them. उसका और कोई पर्पज नहीं होता. मसलन एक लड़का लड़की खड़े बात कर रहे हैं, उनके पास जाएंगे, कहेंगे जी तुम बहन भाई हो, वो कहेंगे नहीं, तो आप उसमें बात मत करो. तो और अगर वो कहे जी हम बात करेंगे, आप कौन है, then start to beat you up. This actually happened very recently as well in one of the universities in Lahore, that students just went around beating boys and girls who were talking to each other, and they were doing this in the name of religion. But we know that no religion bars boys and girls talking to each other. And also, जो इसमें एक और बड़ी critical बात है, वो ये है कि having done this, they feel good about themselves. Having done this, they feel very good about themselves. Remorse होना तो दूर की बात है, वो कहते हैं जी हमने तो बड़ा अजीम काम किया, जिहाद किया, और जाके इनको जो बेराह रवि का शिकार है लोग, इनको मारा पीटा. So we have done a good deed for the day. So that I think is an important phenomenon, and it's important for us to understand within the realm of forensic psychology, because beating up other students is a crime, and talking, boys and girls talking to each other, is not a crime. ठीक है ना? So because we are talking about psychology within the legal framework, we have to understand that the only way, or I would say the best way to deal with university goons is to bring them within the legal system. यानी यूनिवर्सिटीज के अपने प्रोसीजर्स होते हैं, एक्सपेल करती हैं, सस्पेंड करती हैं. But it's very important that these people enter the legal system, and if psychologists are available, provided therapy, provided treatment for their illness. क्योंकि जो illness है वो तो personality disorder है ना. Personality disorder जो है, जो इनकी अंदर जो deep rooted emotional problems हैं, वो जब तक resolve नहीं होंगी, they will keep doing these kinds of things. And और अगर legal system ये provide नहीं कर सकता, तो at least it needs to lock them up. तो अगर वो किसी student को assault करते हैं, तो attempted murder या grievous bodily harm के तहत, these people should be put away for at least some time, for a few years. Because एक और aspect भी है, which I think is very important, and that is that they not only terrorize other students and faculty at times, also create an atmosphere that is not conducive to learning. So, in many cases, the goons of student religious groups attack not only students but also faculty. They also attack teachers. And a lot of the times, there are some teachers that are also in league with them. So even they, one can consider, have psychopathic personalities. And these faculty members involve themselves in this kind of politics so that they get influence and power and allow their political rivals to be eliminated. So it's a complicated scene, but one thing is very clear, there are a very large number. I'm not saying that every single member of religious student groups is a psychopath. I'm saying that psychopaths are generally attracted to religious student organizations. They're attracted for a number of reasons that I've just explained to you. They want power, they want influence, they want violence, and they don't want retaliation. They want to commit violence to others because they have a need, they enjoy it, and they don't want to be caught. They don't want to be punished for it. And also, as I said, it gives them a sense of belonging, it's a group feeling. And in the end, they feel good about themselves because they are doing it, in their view, for their religion. So that is an important phenomenon, but we must understand it in this context. Now, I told you earlier that we will look at terrorism in some depth in this course. But right now, I just want to talk about terrorism in the context of psychopathy. Just as I talked about the university gundas and goons in the context of psychopathy, here I want to talk about it in the context of terrorism and psychopathy. So just as many psychopaths turn to religious organizations in universities, many of them turn to religious groups outside the university. Now, when I say religious group, I do not mean a mainstream religious group. So you would not find a psychopath being attracted to a group that is a mainstream, peaceful, coexistent, tolerant religious group. They would not be. Psychopaths don't like such groups. They go to extreme groups. Groups that are constantly talking about jihad against other religious groups, not against power or any other abstract concept. These people are constantly inciting others to violence, and that is the kind of group that psychopaths are attracted to. This is important, yeah? Now, another thing happens, that these people, even though they're very difficult to exploit, they're exploited by other psychopaths, their leaders. As I told you, many of the politicians, many of the people in political groups are psychopaths. So, and religious groups are no exception. So many of the extremist political religious leaders are psychopathic, and they start to exploit. They start to exploit the difficult position of these people. They start to exploit the tendencies, the criminal tendencies that other psychopaths have. So, a psychopath is attracted to a religious group, an extremist religious group, and extremist religious groups are also usually led by psychopaths. Now what happens? If you've got a psychopath among your recruits, you can use them. If you can impress them with your tone of voice, with your religious piety, with the facade, with the front that the psychopath puts on, if you can impress them, you have access to a lethal weapon. Why? Psychopaths typically are not afraid. Remember, they don't feel anxiety or reluctance before doing anything dangerous. That is a great asset. If you want to use somebody for terrorism, that's what you need. You need somebody who's fearless, who's not affected by fear. ठीक है ना? और ये bravery नहीं होती. This is what I want to distinguish. Brave होता है मेरे आप जैसा आदमी, जिसे डर लग रहा होता है लेकिन वो कहता है कोई बात नहीं, I will go and do this because this is important. ये होती है बहादुरी. बहादुरी होती है कि खौफ हो, सामने आपको मालूम हो कि जी बहुत खतरा है और उसमें आपका दिल घबरा भी रहा हो, आप कहें इसके बावजूद मैं एक अच्छा काम करने जा रहा हूं इसलिए मैं जाऊं. ठीक है ना? दैट इज ब्रेवरी. लेकिन साइकोपैथ आर नॉट ब्रेव. दे डोंट हैव एनी फियर. उनमें फियर की इमोशन ही जो है वो इतनी कम होती है कि they just go ahead and do very, very dangerous things without any concern for their lives or those of others. और साथ थ्रिल सीकर्स भी होते हैं. सो रिमेंबर, एक तरफ फियर नहीं होता, ऊपर से थ्रिल चाहिए होती है, एक्साइटमेंट चाहिए होती है. सो दैट मेक्स देम परफेक्ट फॉर डेंजरस सुसाइडल टास्क्स. तो फलां को गोली मारनी है, फलां जगह बम रखना है, खुद को देना है, etc. They make excellent targets for that kind of exploitation by extremist leaders. और finally, their lack of victim empathy. ठीक है? Lack of victim empathy क्या होती है? आप जिसको हर्ट करने जा रहे हैं उसके बारे में आपके दिल में कोई दर्द ना हो. तो साइकोपैथ में तो किसी के भी दिल का दर्द नहीं होता, किसी के भी दर्द का ख्याल नहीं होता. ठीक है ना? उनके दिल में किसी का भी दर्द नहीं होता, किसी का भी ख्याल नहीं होता, किसी के लिए अच्छी फीलिंग्स नहीं होती. So this lack of victim empathy makes them perfect for harming innocent civilians. तो उनके बॉस उन्हें कहता है कि जी अच्छा है, अजीम कौज है, जिहाद है, this that and the other, ये बैग ले जाओ, फलां जगह रखो और उस जगह को उड़ा दो. They go and they do it. They don't care if so many people die because the cause is important. The boss has told him, XYZ मौलाना has told him कि जी ये आप करें तो आप जन्नती हैं. And they go ahead and do it. They don't have any fear, they don't have any concern for other people, and their boss has told them that they're going to get paradise as a result of this action. So everything is just fine, everything is just peachy, everything is just brilliant. Why worry? So these are the kinds of things that we find have a broad range of applications. पर्सनैलिटी डिसऑर्डर की वायलेंस के हवाले से जो अंडरस्टैंडिंग है, उस अंडरस्टैंडिंग की साइकोलॉजी में बहुत एप्लीकेशन है, बहुत वाइड रेंजिंग एप्लीकेशन है. सो वी कैन गो फ्रॉम कॉमन क्रिमिनल, हैबिचुअल क्रिमिनल, टू समबडी लाइक अ यूनिवर्सिटी गून, a university student leader or gangster, to a terrorist. And the whole range, this whole range has a very high proportion of antisocial personality. Antisocial personality की दो एस्पेक्ट्स है ना. एक तो डिस्ट्रक्टिव एस्पेक्ट. डिस्ट्रक्टिव एस्पेक्ट जो है वो दूसरे लोगों के लिए डिस्ट्रक्टिव होता है, अपने लिए नहीं होता. ठीक है? मसलन बॉर्डरलाइन पर्सनालिटी डिसऑर्डर, वो शख्सियत जो अपने आप को तकलीफ पहुंचा के मजा लेती है, जिसकी अक्सरियत खवातीन में पाई जाती है. You will not find any politicians with borderline personality disorder. Or usually, typically speaking, generally speaking, you will not find politicians with borderline personality disorder. You will not find head of state or heads of government with borderline personality disorder. But you would find politicians with antisocial personality disorder or psychopathic personality. You would find people in high places with psychopathy, psychopathic personality disorder, because these people, the nature of personality disorder allows it. एक तो तरफ तो मैंने बात की थी ना कि डिस्ट्रक्टिव एस्पेक्ट है, जिसमें आपको किसी के साथ कोई हमदर्दी नहीं है, किसी का बात का कोई दुख या अफसोस नहीं है, किसी भी इंसान से चूंकि हमदर्दी नहीं है और किसी भी बात का अफसोस नहीं है, तो आप बड़े आराम से गलत काम किए जाते हैं. सो दैट इज अ डिस्ट्रक्टिव एस्पेक्ट ऑफ इट. बट देयर इज ऑल्सो अ सोशल एस्पेक्ट ऑफ इट. इसीलिए मैंने कहा ना कि एंटी सोशल का मतलब जो है वो ये नहीं है कि आप अलग थलग होके बैठ जाते, बल्कि आप लोगों के अंदर घुस के उन्हें एक्सप्लॉइट करते हैं. सो दैट द ओनली पॉजिटिव aspect that you may call positive of personality disorder is that they do not destroy themselves, unlike the borderline personality disorder. Borderline personality disorder में शख्स अपने आप को डिस्ट्रॉय कर रहा होता. पैरानॉइड पर्सनालिटी डिसऑर्डर में इंसान दूसरों से अलग थलग हो जाता है कि वो तंग आ जाता है इस फीलिंग से कि जी कोई उसे धोखा दे रहा है, कोई उसको उसके बारे में बातें कर रहा है, कोई उसके खाने में जहर मिला रहा है. इन सब ख्यालों से वो तंग आके लोगों से अपने आप को कट ऑफ कर लेता. एंटी सोशल पर्सनैलिटी, साइकोपैथिक पर्सनैलिटी लोगों में रहता है, लोगों को एक्सप्लॉइट करता है. वो लोगों पे इस तरह होता है जिसे हम कहते हैं ना कि खून चूसने वाला जानवर होता है. You know, I hate to use such language for human beings, you know, being a psychologist, but they're like parasites. They have a parasitic lifestyle. हम कहते हैं ना वो मर्द आमतौर पे जो बीवी की कमाई खा रहा है, वो मर्द है टिपिकली जो खुद चारपाई पे लेटा हुआ है, अपनी खिदमतें करवाता है आमतौर पे. एंड एज आई टोल्ड यू, दे आर यूजुअली इन्वॉल्व विद मोर देन वन वुमन. तो अगर घर में उन्होंने बीवी रखी होगी तो घर से बाहर कोई और खातून भी होगी, और हो सकता है कि 3-4 खवातीन हो जो उसकी खिदमत पे मामूर हो, और वो उन सबको इक्वली एक्सप्लॉइट कर रहा होता. एंड He doesn't like a stable job. उसका मूड नहीं, जी दिल नहीं करता कि वो सुबह उठे आम लोगों की तरह काम पे जाए, because you know he is not an ordinary human being. So you find these people living as parasites. तो चूंकि ये पैरासाइट होते हैं तो अपने आप को बहुत सर्व करते हैं, ठीक है ना, अपने आप को तकलीफ नहीं होने देते. ये अलग बात है कि बचपन में उन्हें बहुत ज्यादा तकलीफ मिली होती हैं जिसकी वजह से वो ऐसे बन जाते हैं. सो आई हैव टू स्ट्राइक अ बैलेंस है. इवन दो आई मे प्रेजेंट अ वेरी नेगेटिव पिक्चर ऑफ अ साइकोपैथ, वी हैव टू अंडरस्टैंड these were human beings or are human beings like you and me, but maybe some biological tendencies for crimes and negative behavior, but these were made worse by the treatment that they got from parents, from school, from society, and there was a lot of abuse and a lot of trauma. तो ये चीज भी समझने की जरूरत है. और उस ट्रॉमा की वजह से देखिए ना, एक इतना गहरा सदमा पहुंचता है आपको, या गहरे सदमे पे सदमे पहुंचते रहते हैं मतवातर, तो अपने आप को वो सुन कर लेते हैं, जानबूझ के नहीं, कुदरती तौर पे एक डिफेंस हम कह सकते हैं कि उनके अंदर से उभरता है. एंड दे मेक देमसेल्व्स इमोशनली नम. अपने आप को वो सुन कर लेते हैं कि जी अब कुछ भी होगा मुझे महसूस नहीं होगा, मैं अपने आप को बिल्कुल ये जज्बाती तकलीफ जो है वो नहीं होने दूंगा. तो आफ्टर रिपीटेड ट्रॉमास एंड डिफिकल्टीज एंड अब्यूज एंड बीटिंग्स, they come out of it as unable to feel other people's pain, as unable to feel any emotions whatsoever, as unable to feel remorse or regret. तो ये कंट्रास्ट करना बड़ा जरूरी है एंटी सोशल पर्सनालिटी को दूसरे पर्सनालिटी डिसऑर्डर्स से, कि while other personality disorders may cause a lot of destruction for the self, antisocial personality causes destruction only for others. Yet, we as psychologists need to think about how to treat them, because it's not enough just to talk about and against psychopathic personality disorder. It's not enough to condemn these people. It's also important to figure out ways of treating them. But before we treat them, we've got to assess them. Okay? So, in some subsequent lectures, we will look at assessment and treatment for personality disorders. But the point that I was making here was कि पर्सनैलिटी डिसऑर्डर्स को पढ़ते वक्त हमें ये ख्याल रखना चाहिए कि वी आर नॉट टॉकिंग अबाउट मॉस्कीटोज, वी आर नॉट टॉकिंग अबाउट वर्म्स, वी आर नॉट टॉकिंग अबाउट बैक्टीरिया और वायरसेस, वी आर टॉकिंग अबाउट ह्यूमन बीइंग्स. So even though these human beings may have developed into parasitic creatures, they're still humans, and a lot of the destruction that they're causing to others is in fact a kind of unconscious retaliation for the destruction that was imposed on them, that they were subjected to when they were children. तो इस चीज़ का ख्याल रखना चाहिए कि वो सोसाइटी को वापस वही दे रहे हैं जो उन्हें मिला है. ठीक है ना? I'm not trying to justify it. I'm just trying to explain it. ठीक है? इन दोनों चीज़ों में फ़र्क है. मैं उनकी तरफ से, साइकोपैथ्स की तरफ से कोई सफाई पेश नहीं कर रहा हूँ. मैं सिर्फ ये समझने की कोशिश कर रहा हूँ और साथ ही समझाने की कोशिश कर रहा हूँ कि एक साइकोपैथ जो है वो बनता कैसे. वो अब्यूज़ से बनता है, वो वायलेंस से बनता है, वो ट्रॉमा से बनता है, वो हैरेसमेंट से बनता है, वो बुलिंग से बनता है, वो इंटिमिडेशन से बनता है. तो जब ये सारी चीज़ें उसे मिलती हैं तो फिर बड़ा होके वो वही चीज़ें लोगों को वापस करता है. अभी अलग बात है कि हर इंसान उसका टारगेट बन जाता है. बहुत से लोग जो उसे ट्रस्ट करते हैं, उसे इस चीज़ के काबिल समझते हैं कि जी एक अच्छा इंसान है, वो उन्हें धोखा देता है और उन्हें नुकसान पहुंचाता है. सो we've got to look at this vicious cycle, and perhaps we can do something to prevent it. Perhaps we can do something to change the way society is. Perhaps we can give instruction to parents. You know, because one thing very interesting has started happening in the West. उन्होंने अपने हाई स्कूल्स में पेरेंटिंग स्किल्स की क्लासेस शुरू कर. क्यों? क्योंकि a lot of teenagers were having children outside of marriage. So, and they have no skills whatsoever of how to bring up children. अब आप हमारे कल्चर में सोचें कि एक बच्चे को कैसे पालते हैं आप, उसकी आपको कौन तरबियत देता है. यूजुअली यही होता है ना कि जैसे हमें पाला गया होता है, हम आगे अपने बच्चों को पालना शुरू कर देते हैं. कोई एजुकेशन के सिलसिले में कोई क्लास. लेकिन वेस्ट में कई मुल्कों में उन्होंने पेरेंटिंग क्लासेस शुरू कर, जिसमें उन्हें चाइल्ड साइकोलॉजी भी पढ़ाते हैं, जिसमें उन्हें इस किस्म की चीज़ें भी बताते हैं. उन्हें बताते हैं कि जी आप बच्चे को मारेंगे तो उसमें जो इमोशंस हैं वो नम होने शुरू हो जाएंगे, और उस मार के नतीजे में you can get a very difficult personality disorder which can cause a lot of problem for the person and others. So I am more in favor of an approach which looks at prevention first. ठीक है? यानी perhaps we should think about having parenting classes. We should think about having education on parenting skills. लेकिन ये अभी काफी दूर है मरला. To deal with psychopaths who are there, who are committing crime on one hand and being caught. Then there's the other category where you have a psychopath who's an expert at committing fraud and an expert at not getting caught and an expert at escaping the law of the law. तो ये जो चीज़ है इसको समझने की ज़रूरत है कि there are on the one hand ideas for prevention and on the other hand there are ideas for treatment. लेकिन there is another debate raging on personality disorder. That is the debate regarding जो मैंने आपसे पहले भी कहा था changeability. लेकिन let's articulate it now in different terms. It's a question of treatability. रॉबर्ट हेयर जिनकी मैं बात आपसे पहले कर रहा था, उन्होंने ये कहा है कि जो साइकोपैथ होता है वो चेंज नहीं हो सकता, वो ट्रीट भी नहीं हो सकता. दिस इज अ वेरी वेरी स्ट्रॉन्ग स्टेटमेंट टू मेक एंड अ वेरी सीरियस स्टेटमेंट टू मेक. इसकी बहुत इम्प्लीकेशंस है. एक शख्स है, उसने बहुत सारे जुर्म किए हैं, आपने उसे तशखीस कर दिया पर्सनालिटी डिसऑर्डर की, तो अब जज तो मजबूर हो जाएगा कि जनाब इतनी लंबी सजा दे, इतनी लंबी कैद दे कि वो बंदा रिहा ही ना हो दोबारा. ठीक है ना. दूसरी तरफ देयर इज द आइडिया, नॉट ओनली, एक तो मैं बात कर रहा था ना, ह्यूमन बींग्स चेंज हो जाते हैं किसी भी वजह से. तो वी आर नाउ टॉकिंग अबाउट अ सीरियस पर्सनालिटी डिसऑर्डर विच कैन बी ट्रीटेड. और ये फर्क है ना. एक ग्रुप कहता है कि जनाब ट्रीट नहीं हो सकते, जैसे रॉबर्ट हेयर कहते हैं कि ट्रीट नहीं हो सकते. तो ट्रीट नहीं हो सकते तो फिर इनका इलाज यही है कि इन्हें प्रिजन में बंद करें, सेल में लगा के ताला लगाएं और चाबी फेंक दें. That's Robert Hare's approach. I beg to differ, and I think there's a large number of psychologists who are beginning to oppose this kind of view and make Robert Wong being. Robert Wong from Canada thinks that we can treat psychopaths, that we can create emotional experiences for them that can help them feel the pain of other people, that can help them take the other person's perspective. We can create treatment programs where these people can learn to become useful citizens who are able to empathize and sympathize with other people. We are able to make people who can be trustworthy, and that can be achieved through treatment. So the treatability, apart from एक तो changeability की बात थी ना, कि जनाब माहौल के असर में, मज़हब के असर में, रूहानियत के असर में, अच्छी कंपनी के असर में लोग चेंज हो जाते हैं. लेकिन नाउ वी आर टेकिंग द ट्रीटेबिलिटी आर्ग्यूमेंट इन सेइंग कि चलो ऐसे हालात पता नहीं आते हैं कि नहीं आते हैं, कैन वी डू समथिंग टू ट्रीट पीपल एंड ट्रीट दीज पीपल विद द साइकोपैथिक पर्सनैलिटी लेबल. अब यहाँ पे एक और इंटरेस्टिंग बात जो आती है, वो आती है सिर्फ ये डिबेट नहीं कि एक्चुअल ट्रीटमेंट प्रोसेस में क्या होता है. What I have found is that I agree with the more humanistic psychologists that psychopaths can be treated. But I also agree with the other side that they are very, very difficult to treat. क्यों, कैसे? Let me give you an example. I started working with somebody who had the label of psychopath. One of the first things that happened after I started seeing him for treatment, he had filed a complaint against me. ठीक है? So the person who was trying to treat him and who considered him a human being, who wanted to help him, he had filed a complaint against me, which meant if I took the complaint seriously or if I was unable to defend it, at least I would not be able to treat the person. So the complaint was eventually disproved, and I persisted in seeing the person for treatment. And he caused a lot of problems. Sometimes he would tell things against other people, trying to turn me against my own colleagues. Then he would do the same with other colleagues and cause rifts and splits in the clinical team that was working with him. So my experience of seeing a patient like that for nearly 2 years was that it was a very difficult process, a very long and tedious process. But there was another aspect. एक और बात भी. He was actually treated. I would not say perfectly cured, but I would say that in those 2 years, in those 2 very long and difficult years, that person did benefit, that person did improve his behavior, and that change in behavior was actually measured and demonstrated. So I think it's important to understand that we are not here talking about just a vague notion of human changeability and sort of human beings changing by themselves. We're talking about a process in which first you assess, you diagnose, and then you treat. And when you treat, it's important to know what your therapy goals are. And that's another important dimension. Some people think that therapy is about doing the same thing with everybody. And if you adopt that kind of an approach, you're likely to fail with antisocial or psychopathic personalities. Why? अगर एक psychopathic personality को बचपन में abuse किया गया है, harass किया गया है, उनकी जो self esteem को demolish किया गया है, उनको बहुत बुरी तरह punish किया गया है, तो इस सारी चीज़ों को हम heal करते हैं in therapy. ठीक है ना? We provide some healing process for that kind of a problem. लेकिन there is another side to that. Many of them did not have consistent parenting. Many of them did not know what was right, what was wrong. They got mixed messages throughout their childhood. Now in therapy, we set boundaries for them, those boundaries that were never really clear to them. In therapy, we provide structure to them. And we will talk a bit about, therapeutic approaches and processes with personality disorders. But what's critical here is that these people need a different kind of therapy. ठीक है? जिसमें कुछ स्ट्रक्चर भी हो, कुछ बाउंड्रीज भी इन्फोर्स हो, कुछ लिमिट्स उनके बिहेवियर पे लगाए जाएं, कुछ कॉन्सिक्वेंसेज हो एक्शंस के. A lot of psychotherapists become so humane that even dealing with antisocial personalities, psychopathic personalities, they use the same kind of treatment approaches that they've been using with others, and they fail. And the problem with that failure is that then they turn around and say that personality disorder is not treatable. अब ये देखें, ये काउंटर वो बात जो होती है ना, अपनी आपको बात को आप निगेट कर रहे हैं. एक तरफ आप कह रहे हैं कि जनाब तमाम इंसान जो है उनसे अच्छी ट्रीटमेंट करनी चाहिए, ह्यूमनिस्टिक ट्रीटमेंट करनी चाहिए, उन्हें अनकंडीशनल पॉजिटिव रिगार्ड देना चाहिए. लेकिन जब आप एक साइकोपैथ के साथ यही ट्रीटमेंट करते हैं और वो फेल हो जाती है, तो अब आप उसको बंदे को फेंक देते हैं, कहते हैं जी ये तो ट्रीटेबल नहीं. Now that's not fair. Instead, what we should do is change our therapeutic style to meet the needs of the people with personality disorders. I'm not saying that we need to abandon empathy or unconditional positive regard. All I'm saying is that we need to use these ideas of empathy and unconditional positive regard, try and understand and grasp the context from which the antisocial personality is coming, and then also set limits when we have to, set boundaries when we have to, provide consequences of actions when you have to, and then we can have a better therapy. ठीक है ना? उसमें social skills training भी हो सकती है, उसमें assertiveness training भी हो सकती है, उसमें anger management training भी हो सकती है, उसमें substance misuse therapy भी हो सकती है, उसमें cognitive behavioral self-education, self-empowerment therapy हो सकती है. There's all sorts of group intervention and individual interventions possible. जैसे अब dialectical behavior therapy जो एक नई therapy निकली है to deal specifically with personality disorders, we can use that, which is actually a mixture of individual therapy and group therapy. लेकिन उसमें भी जो limit setting होती है, जो boundary setting होती है, वो बहुत important होती है. And perhaps That's what many of the psychopaths need. That's what many of the antisocial personality people need. Okay? So, here again, coming back to the changeability versus treatability themes, I would say that I believe psychologists should hold this as a matter of conviction. The people can change. Therefore, you can never with 100% certainty predict whether a person is going to commit another crime or not. Okay? Second point, that not only should we consider the possibility of changeability, we should be aware of the option of treatability. I'm not saying that everybody and every disorder is treatable, but it helps us, we're optimistic. क्यों? अगर आप सोचते हैं कि जी फलां चीज ट्रीट ही नहीं हो सकती तो आप उसकी ट्रीटमेंट के लिए कोई एफर्ट ही नहीं करेंगे. चांसेस आर यू वोंट इवन स्टार्ट. आपको किसी ने रेफर किया जी एक बंदा है प्लीज इसको पर्सनालिटी डिसऑर्डर है इसको ट्रीटमेंट दें, तो आप उसके लिख देना सॉरी पर्सनालिटी डिसऑर्डर तो ट्रीटेबल नहीं होते. लेकिन बिलीव वो ट्रीटेबल हैं, then you'll find a way to treat them. You will look at the literature that's increasing now, which is actually trying to treat personality disorder. प्रॉब्लम है ना कि पर्सनालिटी डिसऑर्डर्स की डेफिनेशन ही यही होती थी कि ये ट्रीट नहीं हो सकते, इसीलिए इन्हें हम पर्सनालिटी डिसऑर्डर कहते थे, बिहेवियरल या इमोशनल डिसऑर्डर्स नहीं कहते थे. अगर किसी को एंग्जाइटी है आप उसे रिलैक्स करा दें, उसकी एंग्जाइटी दूर हो जाएगी. पर्सनालिटी डिसऑर्डर में प्रॉब्लम ये होता था कि साइकोलॉजिस्ट वो ट्रीट नहीं होते थे. इनफैक्ट दे यूज्ड टू कॉज अ लॉट ऑफ प्रॉब्लम्स फॉर द साइकोलॉजिस्ट. तो इस वजह से उन्हें पर्सनालिटी डिसऑर्डर कहा जाता है. तो चूंकि अनट्रीटेबिलिटी जो है वो पर्सनालिटी डिसऑर्डर की कंसेप्चुअलाइजेशन में मौजूद है, उस आइडिया में मौजूद है, तो इसलिए लोग कॉन्स्टेंटली अनट्रीटेबिलिटी बात करते हैं. तो इस अनट्रीटेबिलिटी की नोशन की वजह से बहुत नुकसान हुआ है मेरे ख्याल में, एंड पीपल हैव वेस्टेड अ लॉट ऑफ लाइव्स हैव बीन वेस्टेड in prisons and in the lives of crime because they haven't been provided the right kind of treatment, the right kind of therapy that a psychologist can provide. And that is why I would say that I fall very clearly on the treatability and changeability side of the argument, and I submit very humbly that I think we need to provide therapy to people with personality disorders, but it's also important that we learn more about therapy for personality disorders, that we specialize in providing those therapies that have specially been developed for personality disorders. So trying to apply one kind of therapy on another kind of disorder is not a very good idea. We should look at adaptations, maybe get treatment for, maybe get training for these kinds of therapies and then apply them to people with personality disorders. I think that is the crucial thing here. We are human beings. We must treat people with personality disorders as human beings, provide them opportunities for treatment, but have specially tailor-made treatment for them. Khuda Hafiz.